So I didn't introduce myself earlier. I'm Luke Ibbotson, so I lead the research and development team at Vodafone Group, and I have the pleasure of being the vice chair for the post-quantum telco network task force that Laurie chairs. So for the next 15-20 minutes, sorry, 10 minutes now. For the next 10 minutes, we're going to give you a very, very quick update on the progress of the task force and go very, very briefly into the latest deliverable, which is all about telco use cases. So maybe, Laurie, should we kick it off with a...
Yeah, so I think let's start with why did we form the task force to begin with. So over the last presentations and panels, we've talked about raising awareness, and we've talked about planning and preparation. I think that was sort of a common theme across almost everybody that spoke. Whether it was from a government perspective, whether it was from an operator and telco perspective, or other industries. So the post-quantum telco network group, it was formed 18 months ago. And in that time, since we first started out, you can see here we have over 57 company members. Not all of them are listed there. But we have over 57 company members representing not just the operators, but the entire telco ecosystem. And you can see here that, representing across the full supply chain. We've been working together to address both the education and awareness piece and the planning and preparation, specifically through a telco lens, because we believe that, first of all, because we believe that telco is a particularly complex sector that will require a lot of planning and preparation, because we work on standards, because we need to interoperate, because we have challenges around legacy infrastructure, interoperability, backward compatibility. So that was really the motivation around actually forming this task force. Go ahead.
No. So since we formed it, which was we announced it at the Las Vegas event, didn't we, in September 22? So since then, as I say, terrific momentum in terms of the number of companies we've had joining this. We've had 3 big sets of deliverables so far. The first around this time last year at Barcelona, where we published the initial impact assessment. You can see the links there, you can download it. That was the first time we really took a bit of an in-depth look at what it meant for the telco industry in terms of some of the vulnerabilities that we see, but also we pulled together the guidance that governments are giving as well, and tried to look for the first time on a sector-specific level what this means for us as telecommunication operators and people in the wider supply chain. We'll follow that up in Las Vegas with a great piece of work, and Taylor was actually on stage advocating and championing this, which is the risk assessment guidelines. So one of the bits of feedback we received on the back of the risk assessment was that we needed to bring it into a business framework. We needed to take some of the well-understood risk frameworks and see how they needed to be tailored or adopted or used to expedite individual companies' awareness of how to quantify the risk in a business perspective, and how then to prioritize the actions they need to take in order to solve or at least mitigate the vulnerabilities. And then with a big reveal of a few days ago, we published the 3rd masterpiece in the series, which is around telco use case. I don't know, Laurie, do you want to say a few words about this?
Yeah, so going back to planning and preparation, a lot of the questions that come up is, how do I plan and how do I prepare? And what does that mean for telco? And this is effectively this document that we've published, and I do encourage you to have a look, because it makes for some potentially interesting bedtime reading. It's over 100 pages, but it does start to go into the detail of a use case by use case approach, where we start to look at what does that mean, really. And ultimately, managing a cryptography migration, it's all about managing dependencies. It's all about understanding what is it that needs to happen before I can actually implement a post-quantum capability. And this is not just this isn't just the standards. We've talked about the standards. We've talked about the excellent work that NIST is doing, and that is now sort of becoming, this is now being standardized as we speak. But that's really just the beginning, because then those standards need to be implemented into other standards. So the algorithms need to be implemented into, for example, TLS. They need to be implemented into the network infrastructure that we buy. We need to be looking at the cryptography solutions. So it's only when you go into the use case, the specific use case, and you start to look at what needs to happen. So what is the sensitive data that I need to be protecting? What are my dependencies from a supply chain perspective, and how do I manage that supply chain dependency? It's only when you get into that level of detail that you can actually start to make a plan around a migration and an implementation strategy. And that is exactly what the task force have done. And I have to say, we had the benefit of some really sort of deep technical knowledge across the full supply chain to inform the work that has gone into the document. And we see that as an iterative process, because we've started with a set of use cases. We will be continuing, this is a working document, we will be continuing to update it, we will be continuing to add use cases, add learnings, add experience, and that's where ultimately all of you come in, because this isn't something that a single person or a single organization can do. This really, this is a real classic case of it takes a village. And part of the work of the task force is to bring those stakeholders, that knowledge, that experience together.
Ooh, I was expecting the use cases to pop up then, but they're not.
No.
So we're now on the process slide. So I think one of the things that you will, in fact, there's the use cases next. So let's go, we'll look at these and then we'll go back to the process.
Sure.
I think makes more sense. So we've spoken, Laurie's introduced these in her comments. If you go into the document, you will see a full elaboration of each of these in terms of the implications for post-quantum, which includes in many, I think in maybe 80 or 90% of the cases, we've identified gaps in the standards that need to be addressed in order for these use cases to be properly secured against the quantum threat. The other thing I would mention here is that we say quantum threat, there's also a little bit of opportunity in here as well, because if we look on the right-hand side of things that we've described as some of the more customer impacting use cases, certainly the top couple are such as virtual private networks, VPNs, and software-defined wide area networks. Those are common security products in any mobile operator's portfolio that we sell today. We are seeing a lot of demand now starting to emerge from certain customers, certain sectors, for us to be providing them with quantum-safe versions of the security products that we offer today. So there's good commercial opportunity in here as well. It's not just around needing to build the migration plan to be able to secure our own systems. But if you do look on the left-hand side, there's a heap of things there. They are not intended to be listed in order of priority at all. I think all of them we're starting to work on, and they all need to be addressed in very timely order. And the more we go into this, and the learnings from Laurie and I leading this group over the past 18 months or more, it's like peeling an onion. There's more and more complexity that we keep coming across in terms of just how widespread the use of this cryptography is, and how complex it might be in some cases to be able to make those use cases quantum safe, or at least resistant to quantum attack. So Laurie, do you want to say anything more? Shall I go back to the process?
Yeah, let's go back to the planning. So we've spoken about planning and preparation, and going back to that awareness piece. What is very clear is that this is not a CISO problem. This is something that needs to be looked at by the entire organization. There needs to be, first of all, a top-down sponsorship. So going back to, I think, Sebastian, you mentioned the C-suite awareness. This needs to be prioritized, and it needs to be cascaded top-down. But then there needs to be sort of a piece of work around, who is actually doing this work, who needs to sponsor the work, who needs to fund the work. So this is really a problem that it's an entire organization's problem. And if we think of the operators here have a really important role to play, because ultimately the operators are the ones that are managing the supply chain. They're putting the requirements on the supply chain. If this doesn't go into the requirements, then ultimately the vendors are going to sit back and relax. So the operators have a really important role to play around this planning and preparation, and there is work to do around internal coordination across the different parts of what are generally quite complex organizations. One thing that I did want to highlight that in some cases gets left behind or forgotten. So there's a governance piece, and actually I think in one of the original diagrams, we've got it sort of going across the bottom, because we see that the governance is actually something that you don't do the governance once and then forget about it. That is something that will need to be an ongoing piece of work. So, and it will need to underpin all of this process. So moving from sort of developing the skills to cryptographic discovery and analysis, to analyzing what are the risks, to be able to prioritize what it is that needs to be done first and what needs to be done maybe at a later stage, to the remediation itself. All of this will be, first of all, an iterative process. It won't be a one-size-fits-all where you do it and you forget about it. And it will need to be underpinned by very strong governance if we want to manage it efficiently.
So just to add to that, is governance, but it's also a high degree of automation. So as we're looking at these little cogwheels here, this isn't something that we believe can be done manually. I think this is going to be a rapidly changing landscape. The other part that's buried in here is the need for crypto agility. We mentioned that a few times, but I think it's extremely important to be aware of. This isn't just a one-time fix. We take out one algorithm, swap it for another, and just declare it to be job done. We know that this is a rapidly developing field, and we know that we're going to be having to look at perhaps even different combinations of cryptography in the near term to make sure that we've got the right degree of protection. So agility and automation are some of the key principles behind what we're advocating in the in the telco use cases documents. So let's go back. So I think this is a look ahead to the year ahead. So I mentioned a moment ago that we're going to be looking at unpacking what people mean by hybrid. So you'll have seen a few days ago, even Apple announced that they would be making quantum safe version of the iMessage service, which is actually using a hybrid approach where they're taking a quantum key distribution mechanism, a quantum exchange mechanism and pairing it with conventional cryptography. This is an excellent example of the steps that companies will need to take. So we're pleased to see that this is starting to already hit the devices that you're going to have in your hands. So I think that really reinforces that point. The other piece we're going to be continuing around public key infrastructure. We've already discovered that runs right the way through all of the different use cases. It's something that's very, very complex. It's another transformation program in its own right. But we believe that by looking at the synergies between how we might want to transform PKI and the way that we need to be implementing post-quantum cryptography, there ought to be ways of being able to speed up and make things perhaps even a little bit cheaper to implement if we start planning on time. The middle section, I don't know if Laurie wants to take. I mean, this is an ongoing mission in terms of the awareness piece.
Yeah, we've talked about the collaboration aspect, and one of the things that is taking up a lot of our time is the outreach and the cooperation with different organizations within the telco ecosystem, and also with relevant sort of standardization bodies, industry bodies. It's very important that this education and awareness piece is done in a way that sort of supports that holistic approach, and we're spending a lot of time on raising that awareness and liaising with the relevant stakeholders across the different sectors. And here you've heard sort of some of the feedback on the previous panel around how that is progressing and how it's progressing, in some cases a little bit more quickly, in other cases less quickly, but ultimately we're seeing good traction with that.
I think we're also seeing that the work that we've been doing here at the GSMA is now been taken as a very good blueprint for other industries to start to adopt as well. So I think it's a good testament to the work of the group, which I can't thank enough actually, because we have some fantastic collaboration across that team and some real world-class expertise that has been brought into our party. The final piece there, we very much want people to start to experiment, to build proofs of concept, to bring this away from just being slideware and into real stuff. You'll see in a moment we're going to be doing a little bit of a show and tell at the very end. We have a number of post-quantum demos that we'll be signposting at the end of the presentation. So a lot on our plate in the year ahead. Very much welcome any new members, anybody who's interested in joining the task force. The more the merrier, as Laurie said. This is a village, and we need to get everybody working together. Jolanda's asked us to mention as well that store up your questions. I know there will have been questions from the last panel, which was fantastic. Thank you, Zig. There's going to be another fantastic panel in a moment. We're just filling basically between the two panels. Yeah, just trying to lighten the mood. And but we will have a Q&A session at the end. We've got most of the panelists still here in the room, so please store up all the difficult questions, direct them all to Zig at the end, and then we'll do our best to answer them. And with that, I think.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the proof of concepts and the testing. So we've got a bit of a treat for you coming up around some of the work that is already being done and that is actually being showcased here at MWC. So we'll be providing the information that will allow you to go and have a look at what various companies are doing and speak to the relevant people that are doing some of that work. So please, take advantage of that and go and have a look.
And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Kelly to the stage from Sandbox, who's going to take us through the next fantastic panel. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.